kitchen. Welcome to my stove. Welcome to my table. Welcome to the show. Your cooking may be slow. It's time to get your moves like the pros. Welcome to Cooking with the Joe, the Minisodes show. On this morning's episode, we're going to make a classic. We're going to make country gravy. And I started by preheating my pan over a high heat, and we're using a deep saute pan here. You could also use an enamel Dutch oven, would also work fine here. First thing we're going to start with is bacon. I have here, this is smoked bacon, and this is applewood smoked bacon, but hickory smoked bacon or any other regular bacon would work. And we're going to start by adding the bacon into the pan. And to help render out the fat, we're going to add a cup and a half of water. The water amount doesn't really matter, but it's going to help render out the bacon. And what I've done with this bacon is I have cut it into small dice. Cut the bacon in half like so, and then take each half strip and cut it across into little strips. And what happens is then you cut it across and you get this nice little dice, and this needs to cook. It's going to render out and what's going to happen is the water is going to boil and start to render out the fat. For our other ingredients today, we're going to be using some country sausage. This is country sausage that was links that I removed from the casing. But the bulk country sausage would also work fine. And it's important here that it's country style breakfast sausage. It has that distinctive flavor that's predominantly sage and other flavorings. That's what we're using here today. I have seen recipes that call for beef. Even seen people make it with Italian sausage, but it's not the same. This has the best flavor. And then to make our roux with the fat from the sausage and the fat from the bacon, they're going to give us enough fat to make our roux, and we're going to use Wonder flour today, which mixes the best. Now to season our country gravy, we're going to be using some Lowry's seasoned salt, which really works the best for seasoning here. I've also seen recipes that call for liquid chicken base. And if you could find pork base, that would be a delicious seasoning as well, but that's a really hard one to find. We also got some freshly ground black pepper, very important. Some Lee & Perrins Worcestershire sauce, and some Tabasco pepper sauce. But you could use another hot sauce here, but the Tabasco has that good traditional flavor. And at the end, the magic secret, we're going to put 1 to 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And the maple syrup is going to just offset the savoriness of the recipe. Now, as you can see here, our bacon is bubbling. That's what's going to happen here, and when you see that there is no water left and the bacon is starting to brown, that means it has cooked long enough to where we can add the sausage. And for our dairy for this recipe, because this is a white gravy, we're going to be using, I have here 6 cups, 1.5 quarts of milk, plus 2 cups of heavy cream. I also have standing by near me more milk just in case it gets a little too thick if you added too much flour. The flour amount is going to depend on how much fat you have left in the skillet. And if for some reason you're using really lean bacon and really lean sausage, You may want to augment with a little vegetable oil, but since we are using real nice fatty pork product here, we're not going to need to add any extra fat here. And we're going to come back in a few minutes when this bacon has fully rendered and continue. Welcome back. As you can see here, the bacon has mostly rendered out, and there is some fat in the bottom here. And the water is gone now, so the bacon is going to start to brown, which is the goal here. You want to get a little browning on the bacon, and then we're going to add the sausage. Also, I have pulled some Irish whiskey out. We're going to add a few drops into this recipe. Optional to add a little something in here. Just going to add another element of flavor in here. And you could use anything. You could use a splash of dark beer. If you love cream sherry, that would be lovely in here. Marsala, a drop of brandy. Anything will do the trick here. Just going to add another element of flavor. Starting to see a little browning on the bottom, which is what we want to see here. Just keep it moving. Because right now this bacon could go from perfectly cooked to burnt very fast. So, and I can also smell it. So I'm going to say that's done, and we're going to add our sausage. And add all the sausage in there. Now the goal here is to break it up. And I'm going to pull out a special tool that's going to help us out here. My favorite tool. What I have in my hands here, folks, this is a bean masher. It's sort of like a small potato mash. And it's going to be used to mash down the sausage. If you didn't have this, a potato masher would do fine. But I like the bean masher because it's small and meets the skillet. We're also going to turn the heat down to medium so that the sausage can start rendering out. We don't want to get it brown, the bottom brown, too quickly while the top remains raw. So just keep pressing it down. And what happens here is it's really breaking up the sausage. This tool also works well for making anything with ground meat like ground beef, pork, or lamb. Have to tap it out, but as you can see, we got nice even pieces in here. And now we're going to cook this until the meat turns gray. And then once it goes gray, then we're going to let it brown a little bit. But the meat turning gray means you know that the meat is fully cooked. And I'm finished with the bean masher, so we're going to scrape it out. The bean masher has done its job. And we're getting some fond in the bottom, which is great for flavor. And once we put liquid in here, it's going to remove that beautiful fond. Just continue to cook this. Once we see that the meat has completely turned gray, then we can turn the heat back up. I'm going to move this milk over here. This recipe is traditionally used for the chicken fried steak. Interestingly enough, the country fried steak, which is prepared exactly the same way as the chicken fried steak, the country fried steak is topped with brown gravy rather than a white country gravy like this. This is one of the three classic gravies you find in American cuisine. You find this white gravy, or country gravy as often known, also can be called sawmill gravy. There's also the brown gravy, which is commonly used for things like meatloaf and the country fried steak like I talked about. There's also the onion gravy, which comes from England, but you see it all over, even all the way in Hawaii. The loco moco is traditionally topped with onion gravy. And the onion gravy is similar to a brown gravy, but it's made with lots of onions that have been sauteed and slightly caramelized. As you can see here, the meat is getting very evenly browned. And we're starting to pull up all the goodies from the bottom. Now I'm going to turn the heat back up to high so we can start browning the meat. Now that most of the meat has gone gray, we can start browning the meat. And then we're going to add our flour. And we're probably going to need maybe 6 tablespoons of flour, which we're just going to eyeball into the pan here. It's better to have a hair too much flour, and then you can just add a little more liquid. If you don't have enough flour, then it's not going to get thickened. So we're going to use 6 tablespoons here. If you're somebody who is gluten-free, you can replace this Wonder Flour with half as much potato starch and blend the potato starch in with the milk and the cream. And that will thicken for you this similarly. I don't recommend using cornstarch because cornstarch has a different texture. Potato starch works the best if you're gluten-free. We're going old school, and we're serving this with biscuits in the classic fashion. We're going to use flour. This gravy is also great on a waffle. You make Belgian waffles, and you take a square of Belgian waffles and you ladle gravy on it. It is a mighty good breakfast. And I was famous for that breakfast years back at a camping trip, so I decided to, this morning, to show you how to make the gravy, and it's delicious. As you can see here, the meat is pretty much fully cooked at this point. Now we're just letting it brown a little bit. Now everything's going to go pretty quickly here. Okay. So we're looking at that. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to take and we're going to sprinkle on our flour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can always add a little more if we need it, but now I'm going to do a magic trick here. We're going to turn the heat off because we don't want to have everything overcooked. Now we're going to take a little bit of our cold dairy, just a little bit at this point, and start to stir it in. Important step here is now to slowly add the dairy. If we put it all in at once, we're going to get lumps. Now we'll add a little more. I've seen some recipes for this that are just made with a mix and water. It's not the same. You need to use dairy. As you can see, this is thickening up nicely. Now that it's thickening up nicely, we're going to turn the heat back on, and we're going to add some more. And I'm going to switch to a whisk here to easily blend. We'll get the rest of it poured in here. And I'll get rid of my pitcher here. Now is the point when we're going to start adding our seasoning ingredients here. We're going to start by adding some of our Lowry's seasoned salt. If you don't like Lowry's seasoned salt, you could use regular salt. Or another type of seasoned salt would be fine, like a seasonal. I wouldn't recommend using something like Old Bay seasoning because Old Bay seasoning has a distinctive flavor and would clash with the flavors. And lots of freshly ground black pepper. That is an important part in the seasoning here. Just give it lots of pepper here. Give that a stir. This is going to have to come back to a boil. I'm going to pull out a tasting spoon here because we're going to start to taste this for seasoning. Because we want to make sure we get enough seasoning in here. Because this gravy should be well seasoned. I've made recipes in the past where this gets seasoned with a chicken or a pork base. That works very well as a seasoning. This chicken and pork bases often contain flavor enhancers like enocyanates, guanylate, and MSG. That's pretty good where we want it. We're going to put some more pepper in here. And next we're going to add our liquid seasonings here. I'm going to put just a couple of drops of our Irish whiskey in here. And it's important to put that in towards the beginning so it has time to cook with everything and doesn't remain raw alcohol. Now we're going to put some Lee & Perrins Worcestershire in here. And this is the best stuff. You could use another brand, but I think the other brands aren't good. So this is the best one and the original one. I'm going to stir that in as well. And then a few dashes of Tabasco sauce. You can make it as spicy as you want. I don't think it should be too spicy. But you want a little zip from the Tabasco if you wanted to use another hot sauce like Texas Pete or Crystal sauce. Or if you're in a Mexican household, you can use Cholula or Valentina would be fine too. The hot sauce just adds that extra element in there. I'm going to put a dash more of the Worcestershire. And I'm going to put a dash more salt in here of the Lowry's seasoned salt. Now we're just going to wait till this comes to a boil. And when this hits a boil, we'll then switch to that spoon and we'll give it a good stir, and we just want to make sure it's thickened properly. And if it's overly thickened, that's when we can go forth and add extra milk. Or if you didn't have any extra milk, I would go for just use water. Just thin it out with a little hot water if you didn't have any milk. So just continue to stir here. And I wanted to show you here, as you can see, since we diced the bacon small, it remains in tiny pieces just like the sausage, so that you get a nice even product. Since this is a sauce containing dairy, you want to really watch it carefully on the stove. Don't walk away at this point. If for some reason you wanted to walk away and let it go a little longer, I would just turn it down to low, but you can make this pretty quickly. So just standing at the stove, you can get it done quick. And once it's cooked, just turn it off and let it sit. Okay. The whisk. And the last ingredient we're going to add is our maple syrup and maybe a drop or two more of whiskey. It all depends on your taste. You don't have to put any alcohol in here. It's just if you like it. one other ingredient that's going to be our secret ingredient for this recipe. And you'll be shocked at what it is. I have here some sherry wine vinegar. This is from Spain. This is going to be the secret here, and it's going to cause everything, the flavors, to pop. Using just a little bit of acidity in this recipe is going to make all the flavors pop. As you can see here, we are starting to boil, and I'll use my clean spoon here to check consistency. And just continue to stir. Because once this boils, it's going to thicken very quickly. Give this a check here. And what we're looking for here is called nappe. When you pull your finger across the back of a spoon, what happens is it leaves a trail. As you can see here, the trail is not left when you pull the finger across. That is what we're looking for in consistency. That means that you know when it coats the back of a spoon, and you can draw your finger across the back of a spoon and it leaves the trail. That means you know that it's completely cooked. Now, we are boiling at this point. And I'm going to give it another taste at this point. All the seasoning is now perfect, with the exception of the maple syrup and our secret ingredient. And what we're doing with this sherry vinegar is called a spike. And what that means is spiking can be used for anything. Soups, stews, sauces like this. The spike is going to bring out the flavors. That little bit of acidity is going to set off everything. And having a note of acidity in the flavor will take it away from being ultra cloyingly rich, or if it's working with something sweet. So now we are boiling here, as you can see. We'll switch with this spoon here, and we're going to now is when you just need to take care. Now is when you have to be careful. If you're not careful and you walk away at this point, you could be burned on the bottom. This has a real tendency to scorch if you're not careful. Now, as you can see here, looks beautiful. We'll check the consistency, not yet. This also bubbles and pops, so you have to be very careful. Similar to when you cook barbecue sauce, it bubbles and pops, so it's important to have a pan that's deep enough so that it's not bubbling over the top and ruining your stove with a mess. So, just keep it going here. Now we'll switch back to our whisk. And we can see that it's thickening up nicely. And we'll check our consistency here. Is it pourable is the secret here. Since we are making gravy for biscuits or your chicken fried steak or any other southern specialties, you want to make sure that it is pourable. And we have a perfect consistency here where it's not overly thickened, where we're getting a nice, beautiful, creamy consistency here. So that looks beautiful. Now we're going to check for nappe again. And as you can see here, it's starting to hold a line. which means that it's almost done here. Okay, all right. Now we're going to, now that we're at a good consistency, I'm going to kill the heat. There's enough heat residual in the pan to continue cooking it for a few more minutes. Now is when we're going to hit it with a few more drops of Irish whiskey. Again, that's only if you like, and if you don't like alcohol, you don't have to put it in. We're also going to hit it at this point with about a tablespoon of maple syrup. And now we're going to taste it before we spike with the vinegar. We're going to give this a taste. And that is important so that we're going to put another tablespoon of maple syrup in there. And I'm going to put the other half a tablespoon of whiskey in here. Give it a stir. The flavor's coming out very nicely here. The maple syrup just adds an extra element in here. If you don't like sweet, you could leave it out. Cool. For the last minute, I'm going to put just a dash more salt in here of the Lowry seasoned salt. A bit more freshly ground black pepper here. Add a nice pepperiness here. And now we're going to taste it one more time before we spike. Make sure you get the seasoning when you add seasonings in here. Make sure they are well blended in and you don't get clumps of pepper or clumps of salt. Okay. Now we'll taste it one more time. That's delicious. Now, we're going to put our vinegar in here. And we've maybe put, for this amount, maybe a scant tablespoon of vinegar. You just want to put a little bit in at a time. And then we're going to taste it after spiking. It's very well rounded now. We're going to go with one more tablespoon just to offset everything in here. One final taste. And we are very well rounded in our flavors. Now that it's perfectly done, I'm going to show you the best way to serve it. I have split a biscuit in half here, as you can see. And you just take a perfect ladle of your gravy right across the top. Wipe the side of the plate here. And you have one of the best breakfasts you could ever eat. It is delicious and wonderful. And that is our gravy recipe for today, folks. I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to seeing you again. Goodbye.